Good evening to you all and good morning from San Francisco. Welcome to our third webinar. And I'd like to invite anybody who's comfortable to please put their cameras on so that I can see some friendly faces. Thank you, Pierre. And thank you, Vesa. Nice to see you all again. So, today we have to discuss some theory from chapters 9, 10, and 11 and 12. Chapter 9 is on distribution, chapter 10 is on pricing, and chapter 11 and 12 are on communications and branding. And after we have that discussion, then I want to give you some more inputs on your case preparation for the first case on Zoom video communications. So that's the agenda for today. Are there any administrative or other issues that we need to address before I start on the substantive material? You can go ahead and put any questions or comments in the chat, or you can also take the microphone. Okay, I don't see anybody have any issues right off the bat. So let's start out with the material in the chapters. You've done the homework and I've read them, and I will get to some specific issues in the homework. But right off the top, are there any important concepts that you found interesting from any of those chapters on distribution, pricing, communications, and branding? Anything that you would like to ask something more about, clarify? Um, Maybe you've written something in the homework that you're not sure about, or you read something that somebody else had written that you're not sure about. This would be a good time to have a discussion. Any concepts, tools, and frameworks from the chapters that were assigned for today? Again, feel free to write your comments or questions in the chat, or feel free to take the microphone. Okay, I see that there aren't any comments or questions, so I'm going to ask you some questions just to make sure that everybody has a good understanding of these concepts. So, my first question for you is, what's the difference between a distribution channel and a supply chain? Anybody would like to give an answer to that? It's very informal. I just want to see whether everybody has a good understanding of this, because when I read the homework, I did find some confusion about it. So the question is, what, if any, is the difference between a distribution channel and a supply chain? Or are they the same? If they are the same, then perhaps we don't need two different labels or concepts. Thank you, Lisbeth, for starting out the discussion. Lisbeth has posted in the chat, distribution channel is about bringing the product to the end user. Supply chain involves raw material processing, etc. It's a system instead of just one part. Excellent. Thank you, Lisbeth. And Otto says distribution is more simple than supply chain. Yes, I want to thank both Lisbeth and Otto. Their answers are on track. If you look at the supply chain as constituting all of the independent players or companies, right from extracting raw materials from natural resources and then transforming them from raw materials to intermediate processed materials to components to finished products which are manufactured, okay, and then they go on to wholesalers and retailers and then to the end consumer. The entire, you know, system of players and their activities is the supply chain. And so distribution channel is just the forward part of the supply chain, forward from the manufacturer or downstream from the manufacturer. How does the manufacturer get the products to wholesalers, to retailers, and then into the hands of the end consumer? So distribution channel is just a subset of the supply chain. So that's important. And one of the people who wrote about this, there was some confusion about whether both are the same or not. So I wanted to have a discussion on that. Thank you. The next question I have for you is there any difference between buzz marketing and viral marketing? And what is the difference, if any? These are really important concepts in contemporary digital marketing. So I want to make sure everyone has a good understanding of this. Could anyone please volunteer, tell me what the difference is between buzz marketing and viral marketing? And you can type it in the chat or you can use the microphone. I'm not getting any response. I'm sure some of you must know. Oh, thank you again, Otto. Difference is how to reach potential customers. Need a little bit more elaboration on that. Let's go to Vesa. Is it that buzz marketing wants people to talk about the product, whereas viral marketing might be a simple viral video? That is my memory. Thank you, Vesa. I think you're on to something. Elizabeth says viral marketing takes place through social media. Perhaps buzz marketing could be an event like an Apple product launch. Right. So thank you to Otto, Vesa, and Elizabeth for initiating this discussion. Vesa, you're right that buzz marketing is about getting people to talk about the product, right? That's what buzz is. When everybody starts chattering in a crowded place, right? There is a buzz, a physical, audible buzz. So, actually, buzz goes back to a very old concept in marketing called word of mouth influence, right? So, buzz is just a new term for word of mouth communication. But clearly, it is only the content that is exciting that people will talk about. If something is boring or mundane, then they won't feel like talking about it with their friends or neighbors. But yeah, you've just seen the latest James Bond movie over the weekend, or you've your favorite celebrity has just made a splash about something in her personal life. Then everybody wants to talk about it, right? So Vesa is right that buzz marketing is all about spreading some content that is exciting, right? And then Elizabeth is right in that viral marketing is buzz marketing on steroids. It uses technology, right? It spreads as fast as a virus. Usually a virus like coronavirus is a very negative term. But in marketing, viral marketing is positive. You want to get your message out very quickly. And the only way to do that over traditional word of mouth communication is by using technology, whether it's social media, whether it's text messages, whether it's email, right? So, again, viral marketing is a subset of buzz marketing. Something will not be viral unless the content is exciting, right? But it's not limited to video. It can be anything. I mean, video is very common in social media and YouTube and Facebook and giving things alike. But it started out with email and then went to text messages, and now it's more of social media, but the platforms keep changing, right? Earlier it used to be Facebook, then Instagram, now TikTok. So the actual technology platform may change, but viral marketing as a concept is using technology to spread your message quickly as a marketer. And also, viral marketing is cost effective because it's not as expensive as sponsored advertising, right? So the challenge of viral marketing is it is cost effective, but it's no, you don't have control that this message will go viral or not, right? That really depends on whether the consumers perceive this message to be exciting enough to pass on to their social networks and friends. And Elizabeth gave the example of an Apple product launch. I think if there is something really exciting about the announcements, then it will become viral. But as we saw, when they did their last Apple press event in September, it was very incremental and it didn't have that kind of viral value. So even Apple product launches could sometimes be less than viral, I would say. Any others would like to share any good examples of viral marketing examples where you might have participated or you saw it and experienced it and thought it was cool? Please share your experience. I'm requesting anybody to share examples of some interesting viral marketing that may have come across their experience recently or even historically. Nobody's participated or come across any good examples of viral marketing. Vesa says, I remember one company used viral buzz strategy since they left papers labeled confidential to hotels. Okay. Yes, Tam, thank you. Ice Bucket Challenge was very famous, right? It was started by a single family in the Boston area. You know, their son developed this particular disease, uh, muscular dystrophy or Lou Gehrig's disease. And it was a young man, hardly 26 or 27, who was devastated, and there was no cure for this illness. And so the family started asking for uh, donations to research, and they contacted some celebrities, right? And they asked them to dunk themselves in ice water and then nominate somebody else. So there were so many celebrities like Bill Gates participated, and there were some other famous people. And within about 3 months, they raised more than $1 million, and that was one of the most successful viral marketing campaigns on YouTube. So thanks, Tam, for sharing that. Um, Vesa, I don't remember the example you gave, and it's important to know who was the sponsor of the ad, or the name, otherwise, or the brand. Otherwise, the viral marketing is of no use, right? If people don't remember what the cause was or what the brand was. Otto, can you tell me a little bit about the Zoom background challenge? I'm curious and I'm not familiar with it. Tommy, thank you for your example. Dollar Shave Club, which was one of the early business models to have some kind of recurring membership for shaving blades, right? They had a funny ad that went viral and their sales skyrocketed. So Tommy has added this dimension of sales, right? It's one thing to for a viral campaign to generate a lot of exposure, but ultimately the success should be measured by sales or the volume of donations. So that was a successful campaign. Now, Rose points the Pepsi ad with Kendall Jenner, though it certainly didn't go viral for the right reasons. Okay, so a couple of these are interesting examples. The Pepsi ad and the Dollar Shave ad, they all started out as paid advertising. Okay, so advertising is a different form of communication than viral marketing, because it's a lot more expensive, right, to produce and execute the ad. But both of these, if the ad itself was either entertaining or it was controversial, as the Pepsi ad was, then people can start sharing it with their friends and comment on it in social media. And that's what happened in the case of Kendall Jenner, right? That ad was launched right in the middle of the at the peak of the Black Lives Matter movement, right, when a lot of black people were upset with police brutality. And here was this ad from Pepsi showing uh, Kendall Jenner, you know, just hobnobbing with the police in a very friendly manner, and giving them a Pepsi, and they just transformed themselves. So it was interpreted as kind of undervaluing the protest movement itself. So that was controversial. Thank you, Rose, for sharing that. Otto says when COVID pandemic started and people moved to remote mode, then funny backgrounds were shared throughout social media. Ah, so it was the virtual backgrounds that were being shared in Zoom, right? And so what's important is that what was the content of the virtual background? Is it something that emphasized Zoom's brand name or something else? I remember some of the early virtual backgrounds that went viral were from Airbnb, and they were the homes where people could stay in, and that had the brand name of Airbnb. So Airbnb benefited from that kind of virality. So again, when we do these viral marketing campaigns or we observe them, it's important that we recognize which is the brand or the cause or the event that is being communicated. Because if it's purely entertaining or purely fun, and we don't remember what the who the sponsor is, then that's really not going to be a effective viral campaign. So thank you. I think those are all good examples of buzz versus my okay, let's think of a buzz example that's not viral. Can you think of one that's the some sort of exciting message is being communicated, but not through high technology, or not through the community of users? So here's one example of buzz that I would like to bring to your attention. It was in the early years of the internet. I think Yahoo was launched around 1995, and Yahoo is a Silicon Valley based company. It's undergone a lot of transformations. Now it's owned by Verizon, but it was a startup out of Stanford University in the early days, and they had some venture capital, and they used to make a directory. Google hadn't appeared at the time, so Yahoo had made a list of different categories of businesses. So if you want to see restaurants in San Francisco, it would list it online, all the different restaurants, what the cuisine was, what the address was, phone numbers, and so on. And this was prior to search engines. If you wanted to watch movies, then Yahoo gave you a listing of the different movies in your town or city. So they were one of the first fully .com companies, and they had some advertising budget or marketing budget, but it was not a whole lot. So they did this creative campaign where for a whole day they had a contract with all the taxi cab companies in San Francisco, and they painted them in purple and gold. Those were the company colors, purple and gold. And every cab, before that, the cabs were either yellow or black. So on this one day, everybody was going to work, and on the streets of San Francisco, they saw these cabs with these very arresting colors, purple and gold. And then along the hood, this slogan was painted, "Do you Yahoo?" with a question mark. So whenever a passenger got into the taxi, they were asking the driver, what is this? What is Yahoo? And the driver handed them a little business card, and it just had this URL, www.yahoo.com. So that was a way that people, when they reached their office or their destination, they could type out the URL and go and discover that Yahoo is actually a online directory of businesses. And everybody was talking about it in their offices, and in their lunch hour, and in their coffee breaks. And by the evening, every television studio, every television station in San Francisco was broadcasting this particular visuals of the taxi cabs, and they got this free publicity about what Yahoo is. So that's an example where a creative, smart idea, it was completely offline to begin with, and it created a buzz. People were talking about Yahoo, and then the TV stations, they made it the top story in the evening news at 6 p.m. And so that was prior to social media and all these things. So that's an example where of buzz marketing at its best, I would say. So anybody else would like to share any examples of either buzz marketing or viral marketing? I hope you get the difference, right? Viral marketing is a subset of buzz marketing that relies very heavily on the content itself and on technology to spread the message. It is cost effective. However, the marketeer doesn't have as much control over that viral message as they have over sponsored advertising. Okay, let me ask you again, are there other issues in these chapters that you found interesting or confusing and would like to have some more discussion? We're talking about chapter 9 on distribution, chapter 10 on pricing, chapter 11 and 12 on communications and branding. And in this webinar, I would like to discuss concepts, tools, and frameworks that are of more interest to you. Okay, I don't see anybody asking about anything. So now I'm going to go to specific issues in the homework and comment about it. So let me go here, and in a moment I'm going to share my screen. When I share my screen, I'm not going to be able to see the chat easily. So it's better if you use the microphone. You can still use the chat, but I'll come back to it after a few minutes just to make sure that I cover whatever is in the homework. Okay, so here's the homeworks. I believe you can see the screen, and let me go to some of the concepts here. Okay, please read this, what somebody has written on total cost of ownership, the overall cost of owning something. Let's say you buy a Rolex watch like me for 11,500 euros. It goes up in price and I'm able to sell it for 13,500 euros. Therefore, my cost of total ownership is negative. I am making 2,000 euros on owning and using a beautiful watch. This can apply to virtually anything. So, tell me if you agree with this example of the Rolex watch for the total cost of ownership. So, there was a particular example of total cost of ownership. I want you all to pay attention to that, read it, and then tell me, is there anything, do you accept that as the concept of total cost of ownership, or is there in some way that we can improve on this definition? That's the discussion we're on right now.
Maybe if you buy a beautiful watch like a Rolex, should there be some sort of a maintenance cost, for example?
Yes, the total cost of ownership would be the acquisition cost plus any cost of maintenance. I believe those kinds of mechanical watches did need to have some oiling and cleaning done, right? So you did need to take it in every couple of years to a dealer or to a watchmaker and have it opened up and cleaned. So that part of it is part of total cost of ownership. But I don't understand what this means. If the price goes up, the total cost of ownership is negative. That doesn't seem to apply at all to the concept as I understand it. Can somebody explain to me what this means? Okay, thank you, Otto, for sharing in the chat that you don't agree with this definition. Yeah, owning a car has got many more components to the total cost of ownership because, especially if you take gasoline powered cars, they need maintenance every 5,000 miles, or, they need the brakes to be replaced every 50 or 60,000 miles. They need tires to be replaced, right? The oil has to be replaced. So in a car, the total cost of ownership is much higher than just the acquisition cost. But during ownership, if the value appreciates, right, then that's not factored into the total cost of ownership, because you may or may not decide to sell the product, so it's unrealized, any profits that you can get. So marketeers use the total cost of ownership just to compare the total cost across competitors' offerings. And then you try to, in your messaging, convince customers that although your acquisition cost may be higher than your competitors, the total cost of ownership is likely to be less than the competitors. Okay, Otto says that LUT's MOOC course, Climate Action, is providing a very good calculation example about total cost of ownership. Thank you, Otto, for pointing that out. If any of you are taking that course or would like to check it out, you're most welcome to do so. So now I'm going to go to some other concepts in the homework. Okay, here's a somebody posted a homework on paid search. Let's read it and see if you agree with it or would like to refine it in any way. Paid search refers to the marketing that appears on search engines. It works by targeting certain keywords on bidding on them. Objective is to get your ad shown in visible places, preferably above other ads. Paid search is a great tool. So please read this and tell me if this is clear or you would like to refine it in any way. How is paid search identified in Google? I think most of the description that they've posted is accurate, but there could be, if you're talking about paid search in Google, since this person mentions Google, how is the ad identified within Google has not been mentioned. So that's what I'm asking all of you. When you go to any Google search, Tam says, I think besides the benefit this brings, it could also discuss the harms as well, as competitors could also easily find you and have immediate reaction. Yeah, Tam, there is certainly the possibility that competitors may click on your ads and exhaust your budget. That's what we call click fraud. Maria says it says ad next to the search result. Does it just say ad or does it say sponsored ads? So I think that's the way it could be made more clear, is that, they're clearly labeled and they have to be labeled as sponsored ads. That's the way, they're identified. And it's very important to differentiate this from organic search, because organic search is also, it also depends on keyword search, but it's not paid, right? So I think that paid search is different from organic search in its placement because it comes on top, but it has to be also clearly labeled as a sponsored ad. Because let's say there is a Google search page which doesn't have any ads, and it's possible every page does not have ads, then you only see the organic search listings. And so you must know that, how to differentiate. A consumer must know how to differentiate what's a natural organic listing from the paid search. And otherwise there will be there's confusion in the consumer's mind. Okay, let's go to something else now. Let's go to discuss an important concept of brand equity. Brand equity refers to the power of a brand in the minds of consumers. It could be said that if a brand has high equity, the value of the said brand in the market is high. What do you guys think about this definition or explanation of brand equity? So there are two concepts here. There's brand value and then there's brand equity. And brand value is the monetary value of a brand, right? This is what we are willing to pay extra for a cup of Starbucks coffee compared to the coffee we brew at home, right? Or when companies buy and sell brands to each other, that's the value in dollars or euros that the brand is licensed out for. So brand value is an important concept, and it does lead to higher brand equity, but the two are not the same. And I would say that brand value is more of a financial or economic measure, whereas brand equity, is it only in the minds of consumers? That's what this answer says, is that it is the power of a brand in the minds of consumers. But what does it lead to? It leads to changes in behavior, right? So this is very important, that the way brand equity manifests itself is by changes in consumer behavior. That is, either consumers are willing to pay higher prices for a brand that has very high equity, or they will postpone purchases, they will not accept substitutes, right? If somebody is very loyal to Coke, and if you go to a restaurant which says we only have Pepsi, you might walk out. Okay, so that's the power of that's the brand equity. I mean, it starts out in the minds of consumers, but it is not manifest until it is manifest in behavior. You see all these cult brands where when a new product is launched, people line up, outside the retail store, waiting to be the first to get their hands on the product, right? We've seen that for Apple products. We've seen that for some of the, video game consoles like Nintendo Switch. We see that for, some really popular movies like Star Wars. People line up to be the first in line to see it. So remember that brand equity is, you know, the only way to judge it is by seeing the impact on consumer behavior. Let's see. Zewe has something in the chat. It is also reflected in the price, market share, and profitability that the brand brings. Yes, those are all consequences. At least market share and profitability are outcomes or consequences of having high brand equity. But the willingness to pay higher prices is part of the characteristics of brand equity because it is a modification of consumer behavior. So I would say that, you know, brand equity is something that marketeers build through, the user experience and the messaging, and then that results later in brand value and in all of the market outcomes like market share and profitability. What are some examples of other brands that you have experience with that have very high brand equity? I already gave you some examples like Apple and Nintendo and Star Wars. But what are some other brands, in your opinion, that have very high brand equity? Can you share that? Nobody has any other examples to share of high brand equity? Any example of brand equity in movies? Movies, whenever you have sequels, that's an indicator of brand equity, high brand equity, isn't it? The new James Bond movie has just been released, right? With the new British actor. So James Bond has had high brand equity for more than 3 decades, right? That's why they keep having sequels to them. Toy Story from Pixar Studios, you know? Toy Story 1, Toy Story 2, Toy Story 3. The brand has very high equity. Hmm? Any Finnish brands have a high brand equity? Can you share some examples? Yes, Maria, thank you. Marimekko. Marimekko is not only well known in Finland, but it's known in all the design and fashion hubs and centers of the world. There's always Marimekko products and Marimekko stores in some of the big cities which are known for design. One of the important things about brand equity is it's extremely difficult to build, right? It's a challenge for marketeers. If when you're a startup to get to the level of being a global brand with high brand equity, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money, but it also cushions you on the way down. Yes, Otto brings up Nokia. Nokia did have, there's a survey that's done every year. It's called the Interbrand Survey of Global Brands. I'll put it in the chat for you to look at later. Interbrand Survey of Top Global Brands. So if you Google this, you'll get all the top brands in the world. And for more than 10 years, Nokia was always in the top 10 brands. And then it illustrates the point I was making, which is that it stayed, it was slow for it to get out of that list because it had such high brand equity. So it took almost a decade or more for Nokia to become a top global brand. And then it took that many years for it to drop out of the top list as well. So remember, brand equity is a huge challenge for marketeers, but once you get that, then it cushions you for a lot more time in the future, even when your performance falls. So, Otto, you bring up an interesting point about unicorn. You know, so unicorns are rare startups that get a lot of visibility and attention. They have very high growth rates in the first couple of years, right? And so, yeah, you can say that a unicorn might have strong brand equity very quickly. However, the challenge for a unicorn is to cross the chasm. Remember the concept from the chapter 7 on consumer behavior. The problem with the unicorn is that it could go down as fast as it went up. And so, the failure rate of unicorns is also very high. So some of them will make the transition, cross the chasm, and become really outstanding global companies, right? But a lot more of them will remain unicorns for a short period of time and then fade away. So we have to be careful. Otto, can you give an example of a unicorn with high brand equity? Or anybody else? Do you have an example? Wolt, W-O-L-T, is that the food delivery service? So, Vesa, what is your opinion? Is that has it crossed the chasm and is it here to stay? Yeah, so this is an interesting. Otto gives the example of Skype. I think certainly Skype did cross the chasm and did make it to the top of the top levels of brand equity. For a long time it was the only user friendly website or app that we could use to make inexpensive international calls. It was dominant, but we know that it got acquired by Microsoft, and then now Microsoft is you know using more of some other technologies like Teams, and Skype seems to be lower on its priority. and we don't know what the future of Skype as an independent brand is going to be. It certainly lost some of its luster, right? But the case that you're going to do on Zoom video communications, I think Zoom is something that emerged as a unicorn during COVID-19, right? And it's still trying to define how it will how it will remain as a with its high brand equity even post COVID. So that's another example. We'll have to see how it does. Okay, let's look at another concept now from the homeworks. So let's look at this concept of Moore's law. Can you see Moore's law on the screen? So let's go through what this answer is. Moore's law is a concept that predicts the number of transistors on microchips doubles every 2 years while the costs of computer halves. This means that computers will continue to develop more efficient devices while their price decreases. This phenomenon is described to be exponential. Moore's law drives the technological and social changes along with productivity and economic growth. So I do think that this answer is quite on target. You know, Gordon Moore was a founder of Intel, the microprocessor company, and the initial formulation of Moore's law was that the number of transistors on an integrated circuit can double every 24 months. But then it has evolved since then. Hmm? And there's some important updates to that. First of all, it was that the time got compressed. You know, many people modified Moore's law to say that it happens every 18 months instead of every 24 months, which was the original formulation. And you can understand why, because technology does, the cycles do get compressed. So, because of experience curve and learning and so on, Intel could double the number of transistors in an integrated circuit every 18 months. But then it got refined to this particular formulation that it's not only the performance that doubles, but it's the ratio of performance to price that doubles. And so I would like to, switch to my document reader and just illustrate this with some writing. So it's Right. So I hope you can read this. The more recent formulation of Moore's law is that the ratio of performance to price doubles every 12 to 18 months. I shouldn't say 12, it should be probably 12 to 18 months, somewhere in that range. So again, we are seeing the time compression, but more importantly, you can see that the power of this comes either from doubling performance while the price remains the same, or even the performance can remain the same and the price can halve, right? So, what do we see when there are new models of smartphones from either Samsung or from Apple? Then they are very high premium priced, right? Why? Because their performance has boosted. But the older models, where the performance remains the same, the prices are heavily discounted. So that should be the important, reinterpretation of Moore's law, is that it is not that simply performance doubles, but it is either performance could double or price could halve within that time frame. So that's something that we need to recognize. And there's another problem nowadays with Moore's law. Can you think of any limitations to Moore's law where we are not seeing this happen anymore? See, the current formulation of Moore's law is open ended. It says there's no limit, right? That as long as you give time, the performance could increase or the price could fall. However, consider this, that you know Intel in the late 2000s was already feeling this problem. It's a technological problem. As you keep increasing the number of you know processors in a chip, right, what happens? It gets heated, right? And so if you start putting too many processors and circuits into a single processor chip, the heat it produces might interfere with the electronic currents, and then the chip won't work anymore. That's why Intel had to go to dual chip, where each chip has limited processing power, but the two chips do the processing in parallel, so that overall the CPU has the same performance. So now we have to admit that Moore's law is not unlimited. That one of the side effects of putting more and more transistors in an integrated circuit, or more and more processors into a microprocessor chip, is that it generates heat, and that becomes a problem. And therefore, you have to go into parallel processing. So it's just interesting to see that, you know, technology put some limits. And of course, when Gordon Moore formulated this law, it was not a law of science, it was a law of social science, which is that we see it as an empirical observation that this happens more often than not. But we have to realize the limitations, and then the industry has to adapt to that, which they've done quite well. Any thoughts and reactions to Moore's law? Maria asks, would this also be seen to take place in the production of smartphones? Now we've seen only incremental improvements in recent launches of smartphones such as Apple's iPhones. Yes, Maria, the heart of the smartphone is a processor chip, right? And so what we're seeing is that there are some limitations to what can be used. In fact, Apple used to use processor chips made by designed by outside companies like Qualcomm, and now it has more gone into its own design, right? Because it feels that in-house, and it's acquired some companies that will be able to do this, is that they have a better knowledge of applying Moore's law so that they can fit in, make the chip more powerful, and eventually they've gone into multiple processors as well, even for their iPhone Pro line. So we've seen it happen in PCs, laptops, and we're also seeing it happen in smartphones, because smartphones get overheated as well when we push the limits of Moore's law. So my next discussion question for you is, what's the difference between public relations and publicity? I did see a few posts regarding this, and I wanted to get back to clarifying. Is there any difference between public relations and publicity when we're discussing the communications? Right. Vesa says PR is controlled by the company, controlled by the marketeers, right? You write your own press release or you organize your own event and you control the message that you put out there. And of course, as Petri says, the idea of PR is to build and keep a positive image, right? So the implication, Vesa, is that publicity is not controlled, right? So what is publicity and how does it differ from PR? So the question I'd like everyone to think about is, public relations versus publicity. How is publicity different? Julia says publicity would then be published coverage of your company or brand that is not controlled by you. Yes, that's true. It is given by the news. Very good. So you know, uh, public relations is a set of tools that a company has. It could be a press release that they send out to the different news media. It could be an event like an Apple announcement of their products, right? It could involve lobbying of your representatives in the government, right, to get certain changes passed. And if any of that gets covered by the news media free of cost, right, then that becomes publicity. So I would say that publicity is a subset of public relations. Um, it is that part which, is not controlled by the company, but it is something that the news media has editorial discretion over, and they will only cover some things that they think is newsworthy. So it has to be something new, it has to be something innovative and interesting to the general public. Then the news media will cover it free of cost, right? But again, the notion of being free of cost is that you don't pay for the coverage itself, whether it's in the newspaper, radio, or television. However, it is not zero cost, because public relations must involve the company maintaining good relations with journalists and reporters. Okay, so a company, if it wants to use publicity well, has to have its PR people develop, build, and nurture relationships with people in the news media. Because, again, when it comes to the decisions of which news outlet will carry what news about the company, then certainly personal relationships do help. When the news media cover a story about your company that has not been written by your PR staff, it is not considered publicity. Uh, no, you're right, Julia. Even negative stuff is considered publicity, but it is beyond PR at that stage, right? You didn't have any control. I think the interface between PR and publicity is that the company wants to influence what the news media writes about it. So when I say publicity is a subset of PR, it's good to clarify that the company's PR will want to positively influence the publicity, but certainly negative publicity is also publicity, but the company had no influence over that, and it can only react to it and try to do some spin control or damage control. So, Julia, you bring up a good point. I think most marketers would like to influence the publicity they receive, but very often, if there's bad news that the company doesn't want leaked, it can still be covered under publicity by the press independently. Yeah, Vesa, that was a good example. Kendall Jenner got bad publicity for Pepsi, and I think they had to stop those running those ads very quickly. So it was quite a waste of the company's money. So there is one post on public relations that I want to share with you in the homework. So here it is. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to read through this, and then I want to go to the example that Tam has shared about this Netflix campaign in the third part. So please give it a quick read, and then I'll come to the example. So, have you had a chance to read the third part about the PR campaign on Netflix? Says there was this PR campaign to encourage people to stay at home during COVID-19. I find this amazingly simple, hilarious, and effective. They make outdoor advertising everywhere, spoiling people's favorite Netflix shows. This encourages people to stay at home, watch Netflix instead of going out to be exposed to their favorite show spoilers. I first thought this was made by Netflix, but it was actually created by Brave. Since it's a win win situation that both encourage people to stay at home and watch Netflix, the firm did not say anything. Okay, so I hope you had a chance to read that. Now I'm going to try to play this particular campaign as a video and show you what this is all about, because it is very interesting. So I'll also put the URL in the chat, because if there's a lag in my own video in showing it to you, you might just want to go and see this on your own in your browser. But let me share this with you. It's less than a minute, and then we'll come back to discuss it. Sorry, I believe that I must change the microphone on this, right? So just bear with me.
No, the sound was okay.
It was okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
At least I got something.
Okay. Thank you. I'll just start it again. Okay, I hope you had a chance to.
When Netflix makes outdoor, it makes sure it'll be entertaining.
I hope you got a chance to see that video. Um, so a couple of things. This was initially an outdoor billboard campaign, and what it did was it tried to tell you the ending of some of the Netflix shows, like who died in the show, or who fell in love in the show. So that's why it's called a spoiler. It's trying to tell consumers who come out on the street, um, don't come out, because it'll spoil the ending of your favorite Netflix shows, right? So that's how it tried to spread this good social message that you should stay at home during the COVID-19 crisis. And this was in the right at the beginning in 2020, from about March till June, the first 3 months when it became a global pandemic. So I just wanted to get your reactions to this, to this campaign, and also to see whether it is, is it advertising, is it public relations, what is it? Can we try to get a deeper understanding of how this communication works? So I invite your reactions to this either on the chat, or you could take the microphone. Okay, so Rusa says it could be a CSR. Yes, it's certainly trying to provide that socially responsible message that people should stay at home, right? Who is the sponsor of that message? That's important. Who do you think is the one who's created and paid for this message? Anybody? Every commercial message has an identifiable sponsor. So Elena says National Healthcare Services or Netflix. Interesting. Yeah, it could be one of those. How many of you think that it is Netflix that's the sponsor of this campaign? If you think it's Netflix, just type in the chat Netflix. Okay, Vesa thought it's Netflix. Otto thinks it's a consumer electronics supplier or distributor. Rusa thinks it's Netflix. Stefan thinks it's Netflix. Interesting. Do you think Netflix would want to give away the ending of its own shows on the billboards? Hmm? Wouldn't that be spoiling the experience for those people who come back inside and want to see the shows? So Maria doesn't think it's Netflix because that could damage the relationship the company has with some of its customers. Yes, I agree. I agree with Maria. And so, this is very interesting. Tam has posted this, and I would like to see if Tam, you could perhaps tell us who is the sponsor. Petri says it might be the World Health Organization or some advertising company. Petri is getting closer to the right answer. Sully says American Health Organization or governmental actors. No, America had no part in this. So is Tam here? Tam, you posted the thing on homework. I would like you to tell the folks here who are the sponsors of this campaign.
Okay, so I also don't know this sponsor because I didn't really go to search on this, but I know for sure that it was not Netflix. Like I said at the end, I thought at first I thought that Netflix like sponsor this, but eventually I found out that they did not, and because it's like the win-win situation, so that's why the firm didn't say anything. But for sure, Netflix not the one who sponsor.
Okay, thank you. And Rusa says that on the other hand, people stayed home and watched a lot of Netflix movies. So definitely Netflix benefited from this. That is also correct. So I did a little bit of research and I found that this organization called Brave, which Tam has cited, it started by two people in Thailand. Okay, and they are students of advertising school in Hamburg, Germany. So during COVID, their So their classes went online, so they went back to Thailand, and they had this idea, how do we, and it was limited to Thailand. All those billboards are only in Thailand. Okay, so um, they they uh, they made this campaign with the endorsement of their advertising school. It's called uh, some Miami Advertising School in Hamburg, Germany. So these were two young students who did this on their own. And guess what? When they contacted Netflix, Netflix did not endorse the campaign. They said, no, you shouldn't do it. But they went ahead and did it. And Netflix viewership in Thailand did go up, right? And I don't know how they got the funding for this, but clearly the two students who started Brave, they managed to get funding. I don't know where the source of funding came for those billboards, but it's interesting to me that Netflix pushed back on this idea because they don't want their shows endings to be known, right? But it did achieve the social purpose of, you know, getting more people to stay at home, and the viewership of Netflix did go up. So I guess, first of all, the lesson is that the campaign started as an advertising campaign. It was not a PR campaign, but because there was buzz, a lot of people have started commenting on it, and you know, uh, Netflix has been the unwilling beneficiary of all this, but it's limited to Thailand. So it's very interesting how some of these things happen. And this video was posted on YouTube, so obviously the two students have become quite well known, and they will have a very promising career ahead of them. Let me see if you have any comments or questions on this particular aspect. The ad that I showed you, the campaign, it's called Netflix Spoiler. And thanks to Tam for posting an interesting issue, but I don't know if it fits with PR, because Netflix had nothing to do with it. Any thoughts or reactions? Okay, so the last concept I want to discuss in the homeworks is about the long tail, right? Let's see if you all agree with this particular answer, or if it can be refined in any way. The long tail distribution is a term that is used when during a certain time period, companies' products that are less popular were sold because of sales discounts or other marketing cost reductions. And in the C part, a good example of this is e-commerce store verkkokauppa.com. They probably have product categories that include high demand bestseller products, but also include large number of products that accumulate low sales numbers. Therefore, the bestseller products are shaped as center of the distribution and less popular long tail of distribution. So, is this your understanding of the long tail, or can this be refined in any way? So, I'm inviting reactions to the question of what is the long tail of distribution. Is it that the same company has both very, very high popular products as well as unpopular products, or does this concept have some other implications for e-commerce? Any thoughts? Let me share with you the diagram in case it brings up some more thoughts. So here's, I hope you can see the long tail of distribution of digital goods. What's the implication of this from a practical marketing perspective? Any thoughts? Any comments? You can write it in the chat or take the microphone. Yeah, Maria says, I would say it is about e-commerce companies having a significant amount of goods they sell, but based on, for instance, purchase history of a customer. Only some of the products are recommended to the specific customers. This is important for e-commerce because they cannot portray all their products to a customer at once when they visit a company website. So, I think that the real application of this is in contrast to bricks and mortar retailing. Okay. And we have to go back to in time to when the first e-commerce websites came up, like Amazon. What was their competitive advantage is explained by this long tail of distribution, or even Netflix for that matter. So, I'll go back to the diagram and give you my insight into this. When you have a bricks and mortar store, think of a Blockbuster, or what was it? I think it was called Video Makuni in Finland, right? The store that used to rent out DVDs and VHS tapes and so on. See, in that case, what is the scarce resource is the retail shelf space. So those stores like Blockbuster had to concentrate on the red portion because they want to get the highest return on their investment, right? So when you have a store with only 2000 square feet of space, you can only stock up the latest movies in a physical media like DVD or VHS, right? And so consumers had no access to the long tail at all in that retail model. Now, what's happened is when you have e commerce companies like Amazon, when Amazon started, the average retail bookstore offline had about 2,000 titles. Amazon came up straight away with 200,000 titles. Okay. So it is the competitive advantage of an e commerce store that because they don't need retail space, they can stock more of the rare, one of a kind, hard to find items. And indeed, going one step further, if you look at Netflix, Netflix's value proposition in the early days was that it focused entirely on the long tail. Their value proposition is we are a curator of taste. We will show the audience what they are missing in terms of low budget independent movies, foreign films, and the like. So I think the bottom line is that e commerce has provided much more variety to consumers compared to the old bricks and mortar channel. Okay, it's providing not only the big popular hits, but it is able to provide all the things that are also rare, one of a kind, difficult to find. And indeed, there are some websites that can make a business model viable by just focusing on the long tail because you're aggregating the demand across all the low demand items. In aggregate, your business model can still be viable even if you ignore all the hits altogether. That is the message of the long tail of distribution. Think of music as another genre of digital goods. It is, indie bands and unknown singers who can form their own websites and apps for downloading and streaming music, even if the big platforms like iTunes or Spotify ignore them. So, on the one hand, the long tail of distribution has given consumers more variety. On the other hand, it's given creative artists another channel in which to get a viable business model. That's what's important about the long tail. Okay, I want to close out this discussion of our theory on chapters 9, 10, 11, and 12. Give you one last chance to ask about any concepts, theories, frameworks that you found interesting or confusing in this chapter. We'll wait for your last comments, questions on the theory, and then we'll go on to a discussion of introduction to the case method. Okay, I don't think anybody has any more questions or comments about chapters 9, 10, 11, and 12. So now I'm going to transition to the discussion on introduction to the case method. So your first case on Zoom video communications is due on the 22nd of November. So I'm sorry, 22nd of October. So I guess you're already preparing for that. So let me just highlight a few things which I think are important, and I can then give you also a chance to ask questions. So let me share my screen. This is a note on introduction to the case method that I think it's from the syllabus. I hope you've all read it, but a few comments would be in order. First of all, these are long cases, as you must have seen from the Zoom case, maybe 12 to 15 pages plus exhibits. What you need to know is that this is a set of stylized facts. It's kind of a story, right? It doesn't mean that everything in the case that is written, that you're reading, is accurate. It doesn't have to be. So don't try to do research that contradicts. You might come back and say, "Oh, professor, why is it that the data in the case says that their revenue was so and so in 2019, but actually I went and looked at the annual reports and it's different." So let me point out that the case writers often disguise the facts, or they highlight them in a different way in order to create some tension or drama. Okay, so treat the case as a set of stylized facts, not the truth, and then restrict yourself to those facts. The case has a time stamp on it. Okay, like Zoom, I believe, is June of 2020. That's when the case ends. You have to put yourself back in that time and analyze the case from the key decision maker's perspective. And there are two ways in which you are going to do the case. First of all, I hope that you will have a chance to individually read it several times. Then you will get together within your groups and you will go over the facts of the case and debate and discuss and clarify things for each other. Remember, this is a group exercise, not an individual exercise, and that you have to rely on the talent of your team members to help you deliver the best output. So the parameters are quite clear. If you're writing a written memo, then it's 3 pages, and these are the 3 sections. The context is that the protagonist or the key decision maker has enlisted you as a staff member or as a consultant to advise that person about what's going on. Some of you have real work experience. You know that in large organizations, a boss may come and tell you, we have a problem with our sales or our profits and I don't know what it is. Can you help me figure out the problem? Okay, so that's the context. All your bosses and superiors don't have all the answers all the time. So they've come to you and said, figure out what's my problem, then suggest at least a couple of alternatives and analyze those solutions in terms of their strengths and weaknesses, and then finally give me some actionable recommendations so that we can fix this problem. And if you're doing the video instead of the case, the sections are the same. It's just that you have a maximum of 15 minutes of video time to make your presentation. The cases are self-contained. I do not need you to do outside research, but if you are bringing any material from outside the case, then you need to acknowledge that in footnotes. Otherwise, it might be considered plagiarism. And be very careful about copying and pasting from the internet, because the timestamp of the case is in the past. It is June of 2020 for Zoom. If you bring in any facts that are after that time frame, they are not relevant. Remember, we are training you to make decisions with limited information. If you were in that position of the protagonist in June 2020, what would you be doing? Also, saying just, we need to do more research is not a good idea, because if you tell your boss we need to do more research, first of all, it's expensive, it takes more time. Your boss may say, why didn't you already do the research before making the recommendation? So there's a time for research and there's a time for action. In this case analysis, it's a time for action. Okay. So those are the guidelines that I would like to give you. Let me pause here and see if you have any questions or comments.
Sorry, can you explain again what you mean with the time frame of research? Because
Yes. So, you have to figure out when the case ends, when it was written, right? And as far as I remember, the Zoom case, the situation is in June of 2020. That's when the protagonist is faced with this problem, right? So you have to put yourself back in time in June 2020 and analyze and make recommendations as of that date. You're not making recommendations as of October 2021. Is that clear?
yes, very clear. Thank you.
Okay. And also another point I'd like to make is, obviously when you're doing a group memo, then individual people might write sections of it, but then somebody has to take on the editing responsibility to make sure that everything is fitting and the style is consistent across, because it has to read as one seamless memo rather than three people have written the different sections. So please do make a note of that. The effective written communication is one of the criteria for assessment. And so let me go next to share the rubric with you. How will you be assessed? So whether it's the case memo or the video presentation, you will be evaluated by 4 criteria. That is the structure of the presentation, the creativity, analysis, and feasibility. And each of these has got, 4 points. Like structure has to be on a scale from 1 to 4. 1 is there are major problems with grammar, vocabulary, and sentence structure. All the way to 4 is clear and effective business communication, right? This is not creative writing. I want you to straight to go to the problem. Remember, you're writing this for your protagonist who's a senior executive. They have very limited time, so you have to present what they've asked for with a minimum amount of delay or just circumlocution. You have to get to the point quickly, because they have limits on how much time they can spend on reading your memo. So again, you don't need to have a lot of background from the case, because the person you're writing this memo or presenting the video to has been with the company, so they know about the history and background. So again, do away with that. Spend most of your resources and pages on really defining the problem, analyzing solutions for their strengths and weaknesses, and then making recommendations. The second part is on creativity, which goes from the problems not being identified correctly to 4, the problem is identified, unique insights, creative solutions. Analyses. In analyses, I'm not expecting any stock analysis like SWOT analysis or pestle analysis. I'm only expecting you to analyze the strengths and weaknesses of alternative solutions to the problem. So that can go from 1, analysis does not address identified problems, to 4, where what you've presented is demonstrate sophisticated analysis effectively communicated. And in the feasibility, it goes from 1, do not address identified problems, to solutions consider short and long-term implementation. Short term is things that can be implemented within 1 year. Long term is things that take more than 1 year to implement. And there is some kind of trade-off between creativity and feasibility, because creativity encourages you to think outside the box, but any recommendations that you make must be within organizational and environmental constraints. So that's a part of the challenge of writing this memo. Again, I would like to pause here and see if you have any questions or comments. So, different courses and different instructors handle cases in different ways. That's why I am going through in great detail what my expectations are for the case. And I hope that it is clear and simple, and that you will have fun while doing this exercise, especially for the video presentations. You can be very creative in video marketing and make it engaging, right? Try to use some of the tools that are easily available to you. Have some fun doing it. And again, if you have any questions that come up while you're preparing your memos or your presentations, you can always email me to my Gmail account, which is on the course syllabus. Again, I want to give a chance if you have any burning issues or questions that you would like to bring up right now.
Yes, maybe just a small question.
Yes.
Actually, about the part 2, the analysis part. So I understand correctly that we have to define the problem and then think of solutions for this ourselves. So nothing that is mentioned in the text that the company might have already put into place.
Yeah, if they've already put it into place, then you can suggest some refinements, but
Okay.
try to think of there might be suggestions of things that they are thinking about doing but haven't done yet.
Okay.
Right?
And did you have any number in mind, like when you say alternative solutions?
At least 2.
At least 2. Okay.
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you.
And then the recommendations could be one of the pure alternatives, or it could be some combination of those.
Right.
Remember that for this memo or presentation to be persuasive, you want your boss or supervisor to follow your recommendations, right? So there must be a very strong logical link between the 3 sections. The defined problem must lead to alternatives. In other words, whatever alternatives you suggest, they must be capable of solving the problem. And then the recommendations must flow from the analysis of alternatives. There should be nothing in the recommendations that the reader needs to ask, where did this come from? So if you make a recommendation which is not supported by the previous analysis, then that has lower credibility. That's what I mean by a strong connection between the 3 sections. Problem definition will give rise to some alternatives, and the alternatives must dictate the recommendations. If you can provide that strong link, then you will be very persuasive. Any other questions I can answer? So we have only 15 or so people who've participated today. I trust that you will share it with your group members who are not here. It's very important that you function as a group all on the same page. And indeed, at the end of the semester, you will do a workload assessment where you will have a chance to evaluate all your team members, and that will influence the grade as well. So with that, I think I've covered everything I wanted to in my agenda. I want to wish you good luck and a good experience doing the case. I think it's a very nice contemporary case. We are all familiar with Zoom, right? So we are users and we know some of the issues that have surfaced in the case. So I hope when you write your memo and when you do your presentation, you will rely not only on case facts and your own experience, but you'll also be able to bring up some theories that we've studied in the course all through the chapters. That's why we keep the cases in the second half of the semester, because you can now bring in all the theories, concepts, and tools of high-tech marketing into your analysis and recommendations. With that, I will close out this webinar. I wish you all a good night, and I will see you here again in a couple of weeks. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.